Hey, this is Daniel DiPiazza. They call me the Millennial Overlord. And today on Dov Barron's Loyalty and Leadership podcast, we're going to be talking about how millennials are changing the workplace, surviving in the new economy, and thriving as entrepreneurs. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Barron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Barron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Barron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series, where today we're going to take a look at whether we have actually entered into the downfall of business as we know it, or are we actually in a digital gold rush? If you're a new listener, new viewer to the show, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in, we're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular listener, thank you to you, because you've made us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, and we're also very honored that Inc.com cited us as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. So thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. And listen, there are over 1 million podcasts out there, thousands of them focused on business and leadership. But there's only one show that focuses on what's at the heart and soul of business and leadership, and you're tuned into it with me, your host, Dov Barron. Remember, we always need your help in staying relevant, so please go over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you are a CEO, someone in the C-suite, leadership, in any way, shape, or form, entrepreneur, any capacity, as a leader, it's obvious that leadership has changed in innumerable ways. Clearly, we cannot lead the millennial generation the way we've led previous generations. I wrote a whole book on that. But what if you could just slip on the cloak of invisibility and actually watch and hear what millennials truly think about their jobs and how they're being led? Well, stay tuned, because we're about to find out from an insider. Our guest today is Daniel DiPiazza. Now, Daniel is a millennial business guru and a young entrepreneur based around the massively popular lifestyle website called rich20something.com. He has successfully started 3 consecutive freelance businesses and scaled them to more than $100,000 in $100,000 in revenue with a zero startup capital. That's interesting in and of itself. He's recognized as an entrepreneur on the cutting edge of the digital economy. He's been the subject of interviews featured on articles in national media such as Time Magazine, Fortune, Entrepreneur, Business Insider, Fox News, Yahoo Finance. Today, he's the author of a brand new Random House book, Rich 20-something, Ways You Can Ditch Your Day Job, Start an Epic Business, and Score the Life You Want. With his book and courses, he's training a generation of how to redefine success on their own terms. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Daniel DiPiazza.
Man, that was a better intro than Conor McGregor got last night.
Yeah, well, hopefully at the end of this, you will not be flat on the canvas.
Great point.
Well, it's good to have you here, my man. I'm actually very excited about having you here. It's great to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's an honor.
Oh, that's great. So let's jump in for a minute, because as a highly successful millennial leader, I want to ask you an insider question.
Sure.
What's one of the things that most other, so Gen Xers and baby boomers, just don't get about millennials? What is it you think they just don't get at all?
Well, that's a great question, and I don't think that it's an us versus them scenario. I don't think that it's not at all. I don't think that there's a huge generational gap. I just think that what usually happens is there's a perception difference in someone thinking back to when they were in their 20s and 30s, which is where millennials are now, and thinking that times are the same, and so that millennials should be doing the same things that boomers, Gen Xers were doing at that same time. But just because millennials are in our 20s and 30s doesn't mean that the rules that we use to navigate those decades are the same as the rules that were used in the past. So I think there's just a disconnect and a misunderstanding in the millennial work ethic and our understanding of like community, money, and a bunch of other things that causes some disconnect and some discord.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is a communication issue, and I think that there are certain values that are different. But I mean, we're all still striving for the same things, and I do think that the landscape has shifted considerably, and I want to get into that in a bit. However, you've become, as I said, you've become very successful. You've got this brand new book out. You've been interviewed on all this top media. You've risen through the ranks, but you started out as a blogger. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that. Why blogging, and how do you even make that into a business? So let's start there.
Well, I don't think that the correct way to look at it is making blogging into a business. That is what ended up happening.
Sure.
But I think the element there that's important is creative output, consistency with the message that you're trying to put out, and then patience over time. A lot of us have something that we want to say. We have some sort of movement that we want to create around. Things are important to us. Me, I like entrepreneurship thing. I thought it was funny when they put Millennial Business Guru on the jacket cover of the book. I let them keep it because I think it's like a hyperbole. It's way over the top, but I like it. But we all have things that we're passionate about. And the key now in 2017 plus, whenever you're listening to this, the key to really starting your own business is creating a culture and a community around your ideas. And so I started that around where I was in life, which was I was working at a restaurant, testing out side business ideas, and the blog was just an offshoot of my attempts to repeatedly start side businesses and just accurately reporting what was happening. That became more popular because people loved the disclosure, they loved the intimacy and honesty. Over time, it got picked up by bigger places like Time, Fortune, Entrepreneur, like you mentioned, and then that grew the blog into something that got enough attention where I could build a business around it. But I didn't go into it with the intent of the business.
So the intent initially was just to share your ideas and to report on what you were experiencing? Correct.
The first few side businesses I started that turned into full businesses that eventually I sold, and I laugh too because I look at like even just 5 years ago and my idea of what's possible. Mm-hmm. And I see now that the blog was just the beginning of me figuring out what it meant to start something, provide a service, provide value. And it was just a way for me to document that. And people really liked the fact that I was documenting something in real time rather than talking down and trying to wrap things up in a neat little package.
Well, that's interesting what you just said, that you were talking in real time. And I think that, when they put Millennial Business Guru, that one you just brought up, there's this tendency to go, you're up here and oh my goodness, if we could just reach that place, which of course is what the media does, and I understand that.
Sure.
But what you're talking about is how you started was really, it sounds like very much like, I'm where you're at, and just let me tell you what I'm struggling with. So I'm working in a restaurant doing a crappy job that I don't really like, and I'd like to start something on the side, and here's where I'm hitting the wall. What about you? And that's right, eh?
Correct. And what ended up happening, and you'll find this a lot, I know that we're having a conversation about entrepreneurship. Most people that listen to this are entrepreneurs, but there are also people who maybe can't relate to the exact mission that I was on, but you can relate to the method. And so for me, it was being really honest about where I was in comparison to where I wanted to be. There's a lot of fluff on social media now, especially in my generation, about like hustling and we're making it happen and we're doing things, we're making moves, but no one's really being honest. Right. So I think that the honesty was attractive, and I think that it allowed me to build people, a community of people around me that trust me. And the trust is really one of the main currencies in any business. It's trust.
Of course. Absolutely.
You're making agreements with people that they're going to hold up their end of the bargain after you provide the value. So that's where it all came from.
Now, you did something also, I mean, aside from that lovely, which I personally love, the vulnerability, which was fabulous, but you also did something that was quite revolutionary, particularly in the context of the way we think of millennials. And when I say we, I don't just mean baby boomers and Gen Xers, I mean all of us. And that is that, the general consensus is, and I don't think it's about millennials anymore, I think it's about all of us, is we have the attention span of a goldfish. You know, people can't last 8 or 9 seconds before they're off wondering about something else. And you did something quite revolutionary with your blog, in that you went from the 140 characters of a tweet all the way through to long-form blogging articles, essays even, that 99% of marketers would say, oh my God, do not do that. Millennials will not read past the first paragraph. That you're wasting your time. And I know, because I've written lots of long stuff. I write lots of long stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, So tell us about that journey, because that's quite fascinating that you went right up against the general consensus of the goldfish.
I'm so glad that you asked that question. Not a lot of people talk about this. And so I have a newsletter that goes out every day, 7 days a week, on holidays. If I'm alive, the newsletter is going out. And probably for a few weeks after I'm dead, it will still go out. And the beauty of the internet. And I write long form almost every day, sometimes very long form. And not everyone reads it. That's true. I consider myself to have a relatively large attention span. I have, all over the place, these books. They don't stop. And I also, too, sometimes have to get myself to focus back in and pay attention. But what I found over time is that just like you train yourself inadvertently out of having attention by constantly clicking on Facebook and Instagram and typing and chats. And I mean, just like you train yourself out of having attention, you can train yourself into having it.
Stop. I want everybody to get that. That's a very important piece. Before we even go any further, say that again so that people really get that, because we are so trained to be distracted. So please say it again.
Dov, I will say it again with emphasis. Just like you can be trained out of performance and out of peak state and out of attention and focus, you can train yourself into it. These are buzzy words: performance, peak state, attention. They're buzzwords, okay? But the skill that you acquire by continually doing things that take more than 9 seconds of attention, even if it's 30 seconds to a minute and then 2 minutes, 3 minutes, that skill is invaluable. When I read an article in The Economist or in the New York Times, the quality of that article from a seasoned journalist is like eating a full meal. When I read an article on Huffington Post, it feels like I opened up the wrapper and there was nothing there. It's like you bite into a Twinkie. Where's the cream filling? When you read a really good piece of written material, or it could be a video or a podcast, but especially written material, it does something in your brain where it allows you to not only hear what the author is saying, but also interpret it from your own perspective. And that's something that millennials crave, because we're constantly being fed what advertisers want us to see and hear and think. And reading a long form piece of content gives you the breathing room and the space, not 60 seconds. There's no time constraint. You can take your time with it. It gives you the breathing room and the space to make your own decisions about important questions that we have. And a lot of times advertisers, not just for millennials, but for anyone that they want to reach, rush over important questions, put them in fine print, speed past them, cut the time off. And we need time to have these conversations. So long dialogues are required.
See, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm fully in favor of that. And at the same time, the question obviously comes up, well, okay, but we're still a society trained away from attention. Yeah. So how do you get them to read an essay, a long-form article like you've been doing? Because you've done it incredibly successfully in a way that shocks people. So how do you get them to do that?
You don't get them to do it. You're a leader, so you lead by example. You write the long-form content. You share the long-form content that you read, and you say, who's coming with me? And the people who will, and it's going to be a small community, especially at first. It's not a lot of people, okay? But eventually what happens is people begin to change themselves. They begin to become better people by having longer conversations and more meaningful conversations. We become better people. And then the small group of people that pull back from society, that pull back from all the advertisement, that pull back from all the chatter, that pull back from all the dick measuring, all the just the random BS. The people that when we pull back from that, a tribe that pulls back from that influence 24/7 and really digs deep, reads more, writes more, focuses, has dedication, discipline. We pull back, even if you just pull back for a few hours a day to go into the important stuff, you're able to go back into the world, because we're all going to have to dive back in there at some point. We have to engage with society. But once you pull back, you're able to then go back into the world as a leader. You can't be a leader if you're not learning.
So it's fascinating, because I get everything you're saying. I fully agree with it. It's great stuff. You're sharing some gems here. And at the same time, you built a 240,000+ people following you on Instagram with 5-second videos, buddy. So let me just...
They're a minute now. They're a minute.
Oh, they're a minute. Okay, sorry. Yeah. You wild long-form guy, you. So you built that, and it's interesting because that's been your primary platform initially. And you've really, I mean, people need to grasp this. You've catapulted from sort of no one. I mean, you really are the overnight success. It took about 2 years, right?
Well,
in this form, I understand there's no such thing. But in this form, you've gone from being unknown to known in 2 years.
About 2
You've
years.
leveraged the piece that, yeah, a bit more, but you leverage the piece, which is this very much, social media, short form, Instagram stuff, to now these long form. So help us understand that, Daniel, because you have mastered something that I think that people are very much an either or. Many people in my generation are going, yeah, listen, I don't give a crap. I'm going to put the long form out because it's important and people need the substance. Many younger people are saying, no, nobody's got the attention span, or even older people saying, they haven't got the attention span, so I'm going to put the short form out. You've done this miraculous job of riding two horses. Help us understand that, because that is powerful.
Well, I think that you're going to need a hook for somebody to want to engage with you. My goal was never to get anybody. And look, if you have 250,000 followers on Instagram, which is my biggest platform, but I also have an email list, you have that platform. And of those 250,000 people that have agreed to look at your stuff, smaller and smaller percentages of people see it, smaller percentages engage with it, smaller percentages follow through. So really the idea is just to get a large enough group so that when it's filtered down, the people that actually care, there's enough of them to make a difference and move the needle. Just like with an email campaign, you can send out an email. If you send it out to 100,000 people, you might only get 400 clicks or 500 clicks or whatever. I don't know.
Sure.
It waters down at every level. There's at each layer. Yeah. So I think that we draw people in with interesting little tidbits. There will even be times, I'm a big fan of Seth Godin, and he's all about permission marketing. But there will be times when we need to interrupt people in order to change their state a bit, to get them to distract them with something that's ultimately important. Distractions do work, and it's just then where do we direct that focus? A lot of times the distractions that we see for the advertisements, they don't really have any actual follow through on them. It's just like a quick little stimulation of like some dopamine. You see a car moving by, you see money, you see like boobs, and then you're like, okay, now sign up for this thing or buy this thing. It doesn't really result in the feeling that they create with the advertisement doesn't actually translate to the result that is happening in your mind. You're thinking, oh, if I follow through with this, I'm going to get these results. It doesn't really happen. So what I'm saying is I'll use the same method that's attractive to millennials, the fast stuff, the interesting stuff, the catchy stuff. But when they get there, it's just long form content. And the people who want to stay will stay. I got you. I kind of tricked you into doing something important.
Right. So the short form quick hook, which actually says, I'm going to use this. So you're advertising cupcakes, but when you get there, there's actually a steak dinner if you want it.
Well, that's absolutely.
So you can start the cupcake, but there's a steak dinner here if you want it.
Absolutely true. And part of it is like making sure your messaging is correct, you find the right people. But yeah, the people who want to dig deep really can.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Now you say that this is a time for creatives, that we are in a time for creatives. And you talk about that in your book, and it's important. And that you say to stay relevant, you must be prolific. And of course, you've done that. Like you said, you send out your newsletter every day. Is that through email or is that through another source? How do you get the newsletter out there?
It's email, and we have a whole platform. What started as a blog now is it's an ecosystem. Sure. Yeah. So we have like the organic social media and a few 100,000 people on there. We have the blog with the email list. We have a few different websites. We have a podcast, YouTube channel. We have an app now. So it's a whole ecosystem, and we pass out different pieces of content distributed amongst that ecosystem, and we find the people who really care. And so it's prolific is part of it, but I think you start with one. For me, it was always writing, so I started with the writing, and over the past 2 years, but then really on the whole, about 5 years, I've expanded it.
Sure. So let's go to that for a minute, because I think that there are people out there, I know I've had these conversations many times, there are people out there who just really, I mean, they're very bright people, and you have a conversation with them, you can see they've got a message and they're bright, but they really struggle to create content. They struggle to get into that creative space and actually let it flow. And on the other side, you've got people who are incredibly prolific. They're very creative. They're putting out material all the time, but they've not monetized it. Help us to give us a couple of tips around both of those, if you could. So the person who is bright but hits the creative block, and the person on the other side who is very creative, very prolific, but is not monetized.
Well, first of all, there's no such thing as a creative block. That doesn't exist. I mean, you know this. You're an author, you're a speaker, you're a thinker, you're prolific. Come on, like you've spoken at hundreds and thousands perhaps. Yeah. Thousands of, I mean, because you've been speaking for a long time. You're only 42, but you've been doing it for a while.
Yeah. This is premature.
I can't. No, you know what? I can't wait to get salt and pepper. I'm honestly jealous. Because I think I really have the hair for it. But okay. So there's no such thing as creative blocks. Let's get that out of the way. How do I know that, and why do I say that? Well, first of all, think about your work as a creative, as a blue collar person would think about their work. Do you ever have plumber's block? Do you ever have truck driver's block?
Oh, come on! I've had plumber's block, and I've taken laxatives to help me with that.
That was a bad example.
Yes, it might have been.
But when you think of your work as work and not divine inspiration, it becomes easier to do it because you think, all right, well, Ernest Hemingway would say, there's nothing to writing. You just sit down at a typewriter and bleed. You don't get inspired and then do the work. You do the work and then get inspired. So you write some 500 crummy words and it sucks, and you say, oh, there's one sentence in here that was pretty good. And then that becomes the kernel of the new thing. Now that's writing. It could be you're a painter. It could be that you sculpt things. My uncle was a blacksmith. It could be that you're a coder or a developer. It could be that your art is you like to you're a roofer. Mm-hmm. You're a bricklayer. Right. I mean, these are all anything from a manual job to an intellectual job, creativity, art, entrepreneurship. I kind of use those terms interchangeably because it's about creating things.
I agree. I think that one of the mistakes we make is as a kid, I was an artist. I painted. And I think that is when people say you're an artist. And I told this story before. I spoke to these young entrepreneurs in Vancouver. I was invited to speak to, it was a startup training for high school kids. Yeah. And so I started off by saying, listen, the world is going to tell you who you should be. And that's not necessarily who you should be. And I said, and you may even have a natural propensity to something, but it doesn't mean it's who you should be. Yeah. You've got to find out what it is that really lights your fire. And one of the things I said was when I was a kid, I was an artist. And I don't paint anymore, I don't draw anymore. I kind of scribble, but that's about it. And one of the kids said to me, do you miss being an artist? And I said, if I missed it, I'd think about it a lot. So the answer is no, I don't. And it was not until the end of that presentation, which was a bit interactive, it was wonderful. And then I thanked this kid and I said, you know what, you really helped me. And he said, why? And I said, because you asked me, did I miss being an artist? And I said, no, but I really thought about that the rest of the presentation. And the answer is, I've realized I'm still an artist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? The form has changed. It's not a canvas. It's not a piece of soapstone that I'm carving. Yeah. But the form has changed. And I think it's so wonderful that you put that you can be an artist and be a roofer, be a bricklayer, be a plumber, be an entrepreneur. So it's fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah. Plenty of people think they have this, a lot of our beliefs come from our early childhood and what we can and can't do. I'm not a math person. I'm not very artistic. These beliefs just stick in there. And some of them can be positive stereotypes. When I was a child, everyone always praised my writing. Surprise, surprise, I'm an author.
Of course.
And you focus on your strengths.
Focus on that, yeah.
Yeah, and then in terms of people who have too much creative output but can't make money from it, there's a line, and some of that is you're creating enough but you're not offering. You can create all the time, but if you're not offering any of it to the public and it just stays inside, well, how many people have died with all this art inside them? Or you have people who don't really understand marketing, and so. On the one hand, a good product markets itself. If you have a really, really great product, if it truly is great, most people will tell others about it if you just put it out there. But a lot of times, because there's so much noise, even great products go unnoticed or undernoticed now. Right. And so then it's your job as an artist to not say, oh, my art no one looks at my art. Then we know a lot of artists like that as well. I go to,
Sure.
I live in Santa Monica, and there are still rappers on the boardwalk passing out CDs. And I'm like, bro, you're doing it wrong. Like, they have YouTube now. I don't even have a CD player, I don't think. This laptop that I'm talking to you on doesn't have a CD drive.
Nope.
So right there, you're not doing it right. Now, a lot of people will go out there and say this isn't working. I'm not going to be a successful musician. Or you could say learn marketing. You have to have the craft, plus the skill. So great artists who are already prolific need to know how to get it in front of the right audience. People who don't know how to get their engine moving need to start moving and then become inspired by that.
But I think that's a very important piece for entrepreneurs who are creatives, who are prolific, is that marketing piece.
Totally.
And let's face it, in this, again, that high noise environment, every man and his dog is telling you how to market, from Ty Lopez with his Lamborghinis and girls with their boobs hanging out, to somebody else who is in a suit and a tie and telling you how to market. It becomes equally noisy for that prolific person to go, okay, well, what do I go after?
Yeah.
What would you say? I want to just give somebody some real sort of simple, here's where you start. So let's pretend, because I agree with you on the first half of the question. One of the guys I learned from years ago was a guy called Stephen Manning. I don't even know if he's around. But when I was writing, one of the first things he taught me was write for the waste paper basket, which is what you were saying. That, you write 500 words as a sentence, that's great. Fine, that's where you start. I get that. That's that side. The other side of it is, I really want these people to grasp, okay, you're prolific, but where do you start in the marketing piece? What's the piece they can bite into?
A piece they can bite into. Well, first of all, you don't have to go viral to get seen. So that's something to remember. Prolific creation is not the same thing as prolific publishing. So you should be publishing a lot. And you have to find what platform for you is the best to publish. For me, it was blogging. And it only took 2 or 3 articles that I'd say went semi-viral. I mean, they just got some traction, some headway, some notoriety. The first place that I really got mentioned and noticed was a site called under30ceo.com, which I ended up buying later. And it was like the first, big platform to really put me on and to get me an audience. And I remember I got my first maybe 200 or 300 subscribers to my newsletter, and my mind was blown. I thought 200 people that I could email at any time and they could read my stuff. That, and I had a friend who had 600 subscribers on his list, and I thought, I'll never get there. How will I ever get there? And, and I look back on like my meteoric rise, and I say, all right, well, it started off with me finding a platform I was good at. So you have to do that. And you have to find something that you can publish on consistently. Okay, you do that. And for a while, there might be this gap where you're publishing consistently. It's a platform that you like using, but you're not really getting the response. So it seems unfulfilling because you're like, I'm doing all this work. It's not working.
Right.
And I get it. So one thing that I found, which is really important, is that you have to think of your marketing not from a perspective of what's gonna get the most shares or what's gonna do the best, which is how I would say 99% of people approach it. Obviously boobs will do really, really well short term.
Sure.
But you have to think 2 things. Who am I trying to change? What change am I trying to make? Okay.
Again, say that. That's a good one, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that all too often we're very excited because we've got something wonderful, but we don't ask those questions.
Mm-hmm. Who am I trying to change? What change am I trying to make? See, when you look at those questions, when you focus on those questions, that changes the dialogue that you have with yourself and the way that you position and the way that you market, from one of how can I get people to buy to who can I serve and what problems are they having? And when you really understand your market, even if it starts off small, what happens is you create content so consistently and so prolifically that a few people gather around it, and it's so good that they can't go to bed tonight without telling at least one more person. Then your channel slowly expands and it grows. And it's not about having the largest following, the largest reach. Marketers also make this mistake. It's about having the tightest circle of people with a fast loop. So, for instance, I cut my email list down from 150,000 people to 50,000 people. And marketers around the world, they cried out in agony, blasphemy, blasphemy. We need subscribers for money. And I said, I don't care about people who open my emails once every few months. I want people who are there every single day. So we cut it down by a huge percentage. Now, instead of sending 1 or 2 emails a week, I send 3 a week. And now the circle's gotten, or not 3 a week, once a day, every week, every day, 7 days a week. And now it's gotten tighter. Now it's gotten closer. Now when I send something, I'll get 600 responses. And so the tribe is now working as a small unit that's really connected to me deeply. And as marketers, who are we trying to change? What change are we trying to make? When you understand that, the message will spread by itself. And so you don't need to worry about, trying to make it big, trying to figure out what the hit's going to be. You need to figure out who your market is, and they'll do a lot of that work for you. That book over there, it so surprised me when I published it. It so surprised me because after having written it and even marketing it, I thought I'd learned what I had to learn about at least making my first book. What I realized was that when you put a good product out there and the world receives it, shipping the product is what creates the real change. It's not writing the book or marketing the book, it's shipping the book. Because people get into their hands, then they contact you and they say, I read this and I did that.
Exactly.
That's the change you want to make. Who am I trying to change? What change am I trying to make? Don't need 1 million people. Don't need 1 million people because you change 100 people, they can change 100,000. There's the network effect,
Fantastic. Fabulous. Solid. Rock solid, mate.
Thank you.
Really is. So let's shift direction a little bit because I think that was very important stuff. But now I want to bring it back to the other half of our audience because we have an audience of very serious entrepreneurial people. We have also people on the other side who are in the C-suite. They're already leaders. And one of the challenges they face is, and that's what I said about the insider look, they face millennials who are coming into their businesses and wanting astronomical salaries, wanting to be given a raise or a promotion in 3 months. And a lot of the feeling of these leaders is that these millennials don't want to pay their dues. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, I understand both sides. I get it. On the one hand, I'm living in California. So if I had to work at a job, you better pay me because I can't live here if I don't in Los Angeles. So on the one hand, there's the very real concern of, can I live not only, and people don't want to live, let's face it, do you want to live on subsistence? I have friends who live in New York who have to make 6 figures just to live a pretty, I would say, normal life.
Yeah, average life is going to cost you far more in Manhattan than it would in Idaho.
Yeah, so it's relatively expensive. So startups should, and most of the startups or a lot of the big companies are in these metropolitan areas, so it's going to be expensive. And millennials, I think that we value we value experiences though too. So while we do like to have well-paying salaries, we also want to work in a place that we enjoy. And so a lot of times you'll find us complaining about that my work is boring. I don't like my boss. The office doesn't have a free cappuccino machine, whatever. And we complain about these things because some of us are spoiled. That's true. Not all of us, but some of us, as with every generation. I know lots of boomers who are spoiled, whatever.
Absolutely.
And then some of it's because we were promised things that didn't get delivered. Our parents were either Gen Xers or boomers, and they told us that if we do this, we're going to get that. Guess what? Didn't happen. There's not many degrees you can get in college that will guarantee you a salary except for the professionals, doctor, engineer, probably not even lawyer anymore. There's a lot of unemployed lawyers I know, so we're frustrated about that. And when we get to when we get to a job, we just want to get what we've been promised. Now that's the millennial side, and I get it. We also feel that we should be able to skip steps and not pay our dues, as you alluded to, because we've already been waiting for a long time. I have a friend who's like on his second master's degree just trying to find a fit. If you've been waiting 10 years, when you get out, you don't want to start at the bottom. You want to start at least at the upper middle.
Yeah.
Because at what point do we stop preparing? At what point do we say, all right, I've learned everything I can learn from this sterile academic institution. Now it's time for me to go into the world. And if we're going to go and we're going to get an MBA, which requires us to have work experience first, which they're going to kick us to the lowest level, we're going to get our bachelor's, we're going to go out and get 4 years of work experience before Wharton will let us in. We go to Wharton, and then when we get out of Wharton, we got to go back to the bottom. Right. It sucks. Yeah. So we're pissed.
Sure.
On the other hand, boomers, Gen Xers, bosses do have a point. A lot of millennials are scared to put in work and really go deep because we like the warm feeling of good ideas. We're so distracted by having new ideas, creative options for our careers. We see movies like The Social Network and think maybe I'm the next Mark Zuckerberg,
Sure.
maybe I'm going to create the next Groupon. And so there is a lot of distraction going on. And I think that our superiors, can I say that? Our superiors are, they're not our superiors. I'm almost 30, had no superiors. But we think the people who employ us, or the people who employ us are oftentimes frustrated because we can't seem to stay on task. And it's if anything, it's clear that you need a group of cohesive people moving in one direction to get a business to move. So I can see why having 20 entrepreneurial, millennials would get annoying to a company that just wants to stay on task.
Right.
It's a difficult line to toe, but I think we both need to come together and realize that the company culture is changing, and it needs to change to allow for these new innovative people to make smart, interesting positions for themselves inside of old institutions. Institutions that don't allow for this growth will die. Institutions that embrace it will flourish. And when groups of smart people come together with well-organized companies, you're going to flourish.
Yeah, I think very, very solid points. One of the things I speak about from the platform is that, yeah, millennials are distracted, aren't we all? And at the same time, we know that millennials stay in their jobs 1.2 to 1.5 years. They stay in careers every 4 years. When I entered the workforce, I was asked, what do you want to do? That was a 40-year question. That means millennials are changing careers 10 times faster. And the question is, well, why? And then the answer is simple. Well, if there's more opportunity, why wouldn't you? And the thing I'm constantly saying to boomers is, listen, when you entered the workforce, you trusted that if you got a job, you could be in it for 20 years. Millennials are not daft. They get it. That's gone. And so why wouldn't they want to move fast? And on top of that, here's the other thing that I want them all to get, and I say this, is they learn faster than we do. Not because we're thick, but because of the access to the information and the knowledge needed that it would have taken me 5 years to pay my dues. I can learn in a weekend via YouTube or via the Khan Institute or whatever it might be. So this is the other thing to consider. Then on top of that, as you are the great demonstration of, millennials are generally more entrepreneurial. And if you put them in a box and you want them to follow the frickin' steps, they're not going to do that. They're going to be entrepreneurial. So you have to create an environment that is intrapreneurial, meaning give birth to their creative process and put it inside of your system so they can stay stimulated, stay creative, and still move towards your targets. Am I wrong?
I mean, I couldn't have said it any better. And check this out. Me, the ultimate, millennial entrepreneur, I got a book out on it. I went to see one of my friends who works at AOL in Manhattan. They have made this into like an entrepreneurial millennial rabbit cage. You do not want to leave. AOL in New York, which by the way, I didn't even know AOL was still a company. Apparently they're huge.
Hold on, let me just see if I can remember their theme song. Remember
56.6K dial-up?
Exactly.
I remember
that.
Yeah.
You probably don't even remember it.
Oh, I clearly remember it. And when I wanted to use the phone and my mom was on the internet, I would go on the other phone because you couldn't use the phone and the internet at the same time.
Exactly.
And I could kick her off by like pressing the buttons and kick her off the internet. And then we got 2 phone lines, very fancy.
Yeah.
But I look at that and I think, man, you're so right about how quickly we learn now, and the speed at which we learn is represented by the changes in technology. So how could we be expected to slow down when everything else is forcing us to speed up? Why would we willingly take? I mean, I feel like a lot of the people who want you to pay your dues are just feeling a little bit mad that they had to wait so long to get what they wanted, so you should too. But that shouldn't be the mentality that we have as a society, because we're not going to solve problems if we're forcefully pulling people back. If you really can learn how to program something on Khan Academy within a few weeks, then you should. And you should get a job if you can perform it. Not just because you have a pedigree, because that doesn't help anybody.
No. I actually did a video on this and saying that the fall of the education system, and the part of the fall of the education system is you spend $100,000 to get a BA that's good for wiping your ass on and not much else.
Yeah.
Because particularly if it's even in technology, and tell me something that isn't technology based, because everything's going that way. By the third year, everything you've learned is already irrelevant. By the end of the fourth year, now what you've got is 3 months of training. And I always say to people, take the 100 grand, get it from your mom, your dad, whatever it is, live on a budget, live tight, and go do an internship at a company that is really at the cutting edge, so that at the end of 2 years, you're leaving with a ton of experience that you were able to finance instead of going to college. And the other guy coming out of college with a 4-year degree is standing next to you, and he doesn't stand a chance. He's dead in the water compared to you. So this is like, we have got to grasp. And I'm saying this stuff to boomers when you're boomers and Gen Xers too, is when you're interviewing people, like, you really need to let go of this thing. You must have a master's degree, or you must have a BA in whatever it is. You know, because as you just said, you've got a friend who's going for his second master's. Well, guess what his work experience is? Probably not much.
Zero.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating. And I really hope that millennials are getting this and boomers are getting this, because part of the false GDP of the U.S. is actually student debt.
That's a good point.
It's student debt. We're raving about our GDP. You got $1 trillion student debt. That's why your GDP is good, huh?
That's a great point. I mean, and I have to say too, I'm not anti-school. I have a passage in my book called "College is Dead," and I'll tell you this on your show. I don't think I've talked to them about this anywhere else. I'm probably going to go back to school and get a master's, but because I can afford to, because I have the time, and because I want to, not because I'm trying to get a job.
Not to get a job. Because for you, let me put this to you, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but for you, it's upgrading your skills.
Sure. I'm going to get an MFA in creative writing because I want to be a better writer.
Right. That's very different than mom said, dad said, my uncle said I should go to school and get a master's degree.
Computer science.
In computer science, because that's the emerging. And now, okay, well, congratulations, you're now in the lineup for unemployment with everybody else who's got a master's degree in something that's not useful. And by the way, again, I'm with you. If you want to do a master's, one of the clients I work with, I was talking to her son, and he's at university and he's doing his degrees in philosophy.
Yeah.
Terrible thing to do a degree in if you want a job. But fabulous degree to do something in if you like thinking, if you're philosophical, if you're passionate about it.
Yeah, there's a difference between useful and monetizable.
Exactly.
Okay? Philosophy is a great foundation. You know what? I wish my degree was in philosophy. It's actually in communication, very similar. But I wish it was in philosophy. Very useful. But Absolutely. You can't. Who do you go to with that? I don't know. You have to make your own thing.
Exactly. And today, again, because we're in a different world, you could turn a philosophy degree into a business, but you will need to understand the marketing side too.
Well, philosophers, even historically and classically, weren't employed. They were always given like they were always employed. I mean, think about it. They were always sponsored by royalty. But even the greatest philosophers in the world don't have jobs. What do you think you're going to do?
Exactly. So if Socrates couldn't keep a job, you don't really stand a chance.
Definitely have no chance. You know.
But you can turn that into business if you understand the monetization. It's a very, very cool point. Totally. You know, like I said, you've had this quote, and I know it's bullshit, meteoric rise, but you've worked damn hard, and I want to make people understand that. But one of the things you talked about right at the beginning of this interview was how you shared at a very, I'm at this level and I get where you're at level. Talk to us about some of your struggles. Tell us about where you failed, because I think it's important, because now there are people looking at you as that guy that they, oh my God, because like the way you were looking at the person with a 600 mailing list. So help people understand. Tell us about where you failed.
I don't see a lot of failures. I look back and I see a lot of lessons. So I had the opportunity that was last year actually. Wow, time flies when you're writing books. I had the opportunity to hang out and stay at the Barefoot Wine Estate. So Michael and Bonnie Houlihan, who founded Barefoot Wine and sold it to Gallo in 2000. Right. And they invited me, my team and I, to their estate, and we stayed there, and they talked about building up the whole company, and it was the biggest private wine company in America, maybe the world. I don't know. If you go to the store, Barefoot Wine in the U.S. Yeah. So anyway, awesome stories, great people, and they told me that every time they made a mistake in their business, they kept a giant book, and they'd make a mistake and they'd write it down, and then they'd write down the solution to that mistake so that they didn't make it again and they could refer to the book. And every time they wrote down a mistake, they tried really hard to completely eliminate it from their processes. And it could be like a personnel mistake with hiring and firing. It could be like a systems thing. But by looking at their failures through a lens of, oh, that was good feedback. Even when you can have painful feedback, by the way. Not all feedback's going to be neutral, but you get that painful feedback, then you adjust it. It's not so much of a failure. I think there's a difference between failing and failure. A lot of failing day-to-day basis, but failure is when you just stop.
Yeah.
But I mean, do you want a more? That was a philosophical answer. If I had my philosophy degree, do you want like real, like this is really hard stuff?
I want to know something that you fell on your ass.
Hiring my friends and having to fire them sucked.
Fantastic.
Hiring close friends, they weren't doing the job, and I just didn't know what to do. I thought, well, if I fire them, I might lose my friendship with them. But if I keep them doing this, I can't have them in this area of my business. Very difficult. But I did fire them, and it was very difficult. And I had to do that a few times actually.
Yeah, that I think is, one of the things that we deal with is family business. And I'm talking about mom and pop shops, we're talking about multi-generational. And very often, because you're born into that family, you think you have a position in the business and you are terrible at it. For life, yeah. And often they're terrible at it. And everybody around you is now feeling upset because there's nepotism in getting into your position and you're actually bad at it. And great leaders will actually have to say, listen, Susie, Bob, whoever you are, you kind of suck at this.
Samsung.
Right. And
look at Samsung.
Exactly. What do you really want to do? Let's give you free to do that rather than being in the wrong place. When you look at, we're talking about philosophy here, and for me, that's an interesting subject. So you were out there, you were working in restaurants doing, less than spectacular jobs. What was the turning point in your life, in your leadership business philosophy?
Well, I'm having epiphanies every year, so I can think, one thing I'm grateful for, just now being 29 and I'll be 30 in less than a year, I'm really grateful for having gone through a few cycles of different challenges, and then now coming up on third decade, seeing a few things start to repeat themselves, having it not shake me as much the second and third time. First of all, so grateful for that. Once you start to see certain types of people, certain types of situations repeat themselves, you're like, what a relief that I don't have to be so distraught over every up and down in my life. And my first psychological breakthrough that transformed the way I thought about leadership was just self-leadership. I did this, I call it a skill inventory. When I was at the restaurant, I thought, what am I good at? And what can I do where I'm exchanging something and getting value back in return? So the basic thing about money is you put something out there that's really, really good. People love it, appreciate it, and they feel like you honestly wanted to help them. They give you back money. Money is just the physical representation of the same energy you put into whatever you're providing, whether it's a product or a service. It's not really a real thing. Get this through your heads. We made it up to represent.
Sure.
To represent. So when I started my first business, which was just a tutoring company, and I got my first few clients, and I had enough to leave a job that I was essentially controlled by, and I took control. I sat in the driver's seat of where I was going. It opened up my eyes. It was like opening up the window on something that was just claustrophobic and closed and very, very stuffy before, and the room filled with air. I felt like fresh and full of life, and I thought, man, if I can make decisions in my day-to-day life that affect my destiny like this, then there must be other things I can do that will greatly open up my opportunities. And so I started that thing. I realized that it was possible for me to do this. The possibility was the key. And from there, I thought, well, if it's possible for me to do this, maybe it's possible for me to teach other people to do that. And so that changed the way I thought about leading people by first leading myself.
Fabulous. So one of the things I'm encouraging people constantly is around understanding that there is no there.
Sure.
That we're always in the process of growth. I know you understand that. You read, you're a consumer, things to evolve yourself. But because there's no there, one of the questions I like to ask my guests is, what is a problem or a challenge that you're currently working on in your own business?
Well, that's a great question. We're transitioning our messaging now. So Rich 20 started off as, your business is usually an embodiment of you. So Rich 20 started off in the book that I wrote. Since I started writing it mentally around 2011 or 12, a lot of the seeds in the book are from a younger person who we're still learning. We're always, you're learning, I'm learning. But the seeds now, I look back at the book and I say, oh, I might have said that differently, or I might think of that differently now.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I've been changing, and it's not so much of a challenge, it's an opportunity, but it's still going to take some time, is just shifting the message of my branding, of my brand and my company from one of like, here's how to make more money to here's how to do more meaningful work. And it's not as sexy, and it's harder to market to the same type of person. So I'm gradually, but like intentionally changing the way that the content I put out. So while I do publish things on marketing and business entrepreneurship, there's a lot of other elements now that I talk about that they don't necessarily deter people who want to learn about money, but they're just signals to people who are interested in other things that make them aware that I'm about something different and the community is about something a little bit deeper. And it's like kind of like a dog whistle, you know. Right. The initiated can hear it.
That's
the enrolled can hear it.
Because I was honored that you had me on your show, and I thank you for that. You know, and we talked a lot about finding your soul purpose.
Yeah.
And, you know, what we know from the research that's come back over the last 10 years is millennials want meaningful work. You mentioned it earlier. But meaningful work is not only doing meaningful work in a place that's meaningfully driven by meaningful leaders with a meaningful purpose, but that you got to have your own. And that you've got to be willing to find what we call your soul purpose as an individual. And it's interesting for me because where you're going is saying to people, yeah, you can make money, but you are going to bump up against this eventually.
Sure.
Which is what is the meaning of what it is you're doing? And I think that's a powerful thing. What would you say is, from your point of view, because I said mine's all about finding the soul purpose of an individual, soul purpose of their leadership, and soul purpose of their business. What would you say is the soul purpose? What's at the soul level of leadership?
The soul level of leadership is responsibility. And responsibility, I think that responsibility and discipline have negative connotations to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just an English thing. I don't speak enough languages to tell. Some languages have many words for the same sentiment.
Right.
Responsibility and discipline have this, like, I don't know if you've read Jocko Willnick's Extreme Ownership. That type of stuff scares people. Like, oh, that sounds really authoritarian. It sounds very harsh. It sounds like there's no room for fun to eke in there. Mm-hmm. But I'll give you a perfect example. Did you watch the fight a couple nights ago?
No, but I know about it.
You don't need to watch it. What you should watch the highlights. And you look at someone like Floyd Mayweather. Now, I'm not a Mayweather fan, okay? I'm an anti-fan of his personality. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't really even a fan of his fighting. This is the first fight I've ever watched with him, like a full fight. And I see this guy fight. And he went 10 rounds with Conor McGregor, who's a very serious fighter. He's a very, very, very talented fighter. And I looked at him in the corner in between every round, and he just looked like he didn't even work up a sweat. He was just sitting there. He was like chewing some gum. And he gets up at the end of 10 rounds after he'd been uppercutted in the face by a man 15, 20 pounds heavier than him at the end of a pro boxing match. And they took the microphone to him. Of course, he won. He won in an astonishing, stunning fashion by smashing Conor and just brutalizing him. And they put a microphone in his face, no sweat at all. Looks like he ran maybe a light jog. And he says, well, I think we gave the fans what they wanted to. I told you I did what I was going to say I was going to do. I came out here and I did my job, and we planned to get him knocked out around the 7th or 8th round. And so we got a TKO just like we wanted. And that's just what hard work and dedication gets you. And I've been doing this for years. I'm 50-0. I've never been beaten. And he's made now close to $1 billion personally from fighting. $1 billion. Yeah. And I say, that's leadership, man. That discipline, that responsibility to his craft. I see that and I'm like, well, that's a pattern. That's a blueprint. And he's responsible for his own. He didn't make any excuses for why he might lose because Conor's a bigger man. He took responsibility. He didn't say, well, I've been training for so long and I've already had discipline in the past historically, so I'm sure my past discipline will carry me through and I'm not going to train as hard. He had just as much discipline training for fight number 50 after coming out of retirement as he did beforehand. So you look at that and you say, well, maybe if I had a little bit more discipline, a little bit more took more responsibility for what I do, then other people, rather than me having to tell them, would just follow me. And because leaders have followers, managers have employees.
That's very good. Nicely put. So, Daniel, I know that you're doing tons and tons of interviews, and lots of people are asking you all kinds of great questions. So I'm going to ask you this one. What is the one question nobody's asking you that you wish they would?
Oof. Well, depends on what type of show we want to have.
The kind that lets you answer that question.
No one has asked me yet about my psychedelic journeys. Yeah.
I've actually done several shows on that, so that's pretty interesting. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit. Last year, over a period of about 18 months, I did 7 ayahuasca journeys, including one in Peru, and it was transformational. And I think that we can go down the rabbit hole, but I think what I took away from that is that we're missing in our culture a bona fide initiation and a rite of passage for individuals. It can be a male thing. Traditionally, it's male, but I think that in general, we need some sort of. Jewish people have their celebrations, the bar mitzvah. I just think as
confirmation in Catholic religion.
But
a lot of those things are so obligational,
right?
Rather than a rite of passage that I step into, which is heroic and is
warrior's purpose.
Yeah, more warrior based.
Yeah. You look at the Native American system of like the vision quests. Yeah, it's very appealing to me. It's very appealing, and it's. I think it was something that was compulsory, but it's also something that was taken on with an aura and a sense of honor to do this.
I'm born Jewish. I had a bar mitzvah, and I remember the obligation to practice for my bar mitzvah.
Sure.
And you know the reason why? Because you get bar mitzvah presents. That's why. As opposed to, really, you get some bar mitzvah gelt, which is money, right? So as opposed to this internal warrior journey, which is what you're talking about with a vision quest from whether it's peyote or whether it's, any of those things. And it's really fascinating that you went there because, as I'm sure you know, Tim Ferriss in his last book dedicated an entire chapter to that, saying that he's never met a billionaire who hasn't gone down that journey. And I think, I wrote a whole lot of stuff around that you and I didn't even get into. I know we went into some weird, wonderful tangents on your show. But, I spent a whole background on that stuff and understanding those internal spiritual journeys that we all need, but we get caught in the making some money and having the Lambo to show off on our videos, as opposed to wealth inside. And it's really cool that I know you're edging towards 30 now. Maybe by the time this comes out, you'll be celebrating your birthday.
Not quite, not yet.
But it's really interesting that you also understand, because it's interesting because for me, it was at your age and a little bit younger where I entered that path.
Yeah.
So I think it's also a part of that journey, that desire for not all, but for many of people who reach a certain age and then they go, I want to understand deeper.
I want more.
Many people in my generation are doing it at 50 plus. And they're going on the vision quest, etc. They're doing the ayahuasca, the peyote, whatever it might be. But I love that your generation is doing it like some of mine did, which is to say, this is an illusion. And I get that it's an illusion, but I don't know how to get out of it. It's a matrix that I'm trapped in. How do I step away? And I love that you went down that road. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Well, 2 things I'll say very quickly to close out that point. One, you won't, and now I even love you even more because we're on the same wavelength now that I know you've been initiated. One, you won't meet many truly wise people who've been exposed to that experience who don't smile, because it's hard. It's hard to not understand the irony of life if you don't once you have these experiences. It's really hard to be too serious about the things that happen to you, because you say, oh, I've already seen that. I know what that really is. 2, no one's gonna listen to this. I actually did an ayahuasca ceremony with both my parents. They did it too.
Beautiful.
That changed our relationship. It's a very, very powerful. Spiritual experiences are very powerful, and they're non-religious.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Mate, this has been absolutely fantastic. I've loved having you here. It's been a great chat. Loads of genuine gems. Please tell our audience, our viewers, where they can find out more about you, your book, all of the different things that you're doing, and ways for them to reach out to you.
I'm incredibly grateful, Doug. Thank you for having me. Or I should say Doe, as Starbucks would say. Exactly. We'll call you. Doe, thank you so much.
Yeah, they don't know about that. We did that before, but we were just talking about how Starbucks writes their name on, and mine is always wrong, and mine was Doe. I was showing you that.
3 letters in your name. 3. And it doesn't spell anything else. There's, okay, fine. So I'm honored, and thank you so much. You can use Google and just type in Rich 20-something. You can misspell it. You can attempt to spell my name and misspell it, and I'll still come up. I'm listed everywhere. Daniel@rich20something.com. I answer and check my own emails. I'm on the social media. My book is on Amazon. I'm very easy to find, and I'm here to help you.
Fantastic, mate. It's been a pleasure and honor. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you, dear viewer, dear listener, for tuning in. And I say it to you all the time, and I'm going to keep saying it to you till it gets in there, which is do not listen to a podcast. Listening will not help you. Do something with it. Listen, take notes, listen again, take more notes. I promise you, you missed tons the first time, even if you were, quote, paying attention. And as Daniel has said, please remember, you've been trained away from attention. You can train yourself back into it. It's vital. And again, I want to say this to you. Remember that the challenges facing some of the most successful companies are somewhat counterintuitive. The fastest growing companies are often finding they're spending an absolute fortune training and developing talent only to have them leave them. If you're sick of investing in training and developing your talent, only to have them leave you before you've got a return in investment, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify your hidden loyalty assets by tapping into your purpose. It's vitally important. fullmontyleadership.com, providing you with the concrete soft skills to get you and your organization to the top and keep you there. Why? Because you cannot outsource authenticity. So remember to get yourself over to matrix.fullmontyleadership.com as well, and there you can get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool valued at $197, absolutely free for being a regular listener, regular viewer to us. Again, matrix like the movie .fullmontyleadership.com. Till next time, this is Dov Baron, Full Monty Leadership, saying, stay curious, my friend, stay curious about how you can listen a little deeper, pay a little more attention, and bring your creativity to a world that needs it, because you did not get your dreams by accident. Your hopes and dreams are your soul crying out for expression. Till next time, this is Dov Baron, and I am out.